So welcome to the British Empire Studies Group's July meeting. We have a treat. We have two meetings, actually 3 meetings in July, which is pretty good. We are, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. And for those of you who are returning, you are in for a treat, because this is, I think, the first time something like this has ever been done. Alex is just was amazing at this whole concept of a live show. But anyway, we are the British Empire Study Group. We're a bunch of philatelists, postal historians, and there's even some non-collectors, because we have some pretty interesting topics to ask them. So our next program will be this Thursday on the 13th, where Dr. Darren will talk to you about digital philately and what he's been doing in that area. That's going to be a great show. We encourage you to join that. And on the 27th, we're going to have Alex back again, because this is such a big exhibit and there is so much to see. We didn't want to cram it all into one webinar. So we're going to have Alex back again, live from London, for another show. So that is it for my introduction. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to my co-host, Robert Lutens, to introduce Alex.
Thank you, Joan. Welcome, everyone, to this morning's presentation, The Clash of Empires, for a glimpse into the 1879 Anglo-Zulu War. On January 11th, 1879, British and colonial forces invaded the Zulu Kingdom, igniting one of the most famous conflicts of the Victorian era. This month, July of 2023, the Spear Museum of Philatelic History at the Royal Philatelic Society in London is hosting a public exhibition displaying more than 500 postal, historical, and cultural objects, exploring the context, history, and ongoing legacy of this clash of empires. The exhibition's narrative begins in the early years of the 19th century with the emergence of King Shaka Kasanzaniyakatha and the rise of the Zulu Kingdom, and takes us through to 2019, 140 years after the start of the 1879 Anglo-Zulu War. We'll learn more about the iconic historical event through postal history and artifacts with the guidance of the exhibition's co-curator, Alexander Haimann. Alex is a longtime student, researcher, and collector of Anglo-Zulu history. From 2005 to 10, Alex worked as a collections specialist for the Smithsonian National Postal Museum. Since 2010, Alex has been a volunteer leader with numerous philatelic organizations, including the American Philatelic Society, the New York World Stamp Show in 2016, Stockholmia 2019, and the Royal Philatelic Society of London. In 2015, Alex launched the initial effort, culminating with the current Clash of Empires exhibition. So without further ado, here's our presenter, Alexander Haimann.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction, and welcome everyone to Clash of Empires, the 1879 Anglo-Zulu War Museum exhibition here at the Royal in London. This is a bit of an experiment, both for the format of these webinars and really for this sort of whole post-COVID time where we're doing so much more virtually to talk about postal history and philately and to make it very real and approachable, but in this digital format. My objective here is to try to give you an overview of what is physically here and what this experience is like. If anyone is watching that is able to come and attend the exhibition in person, I hope this encourages you versus takes all the oomph out of the experience. So we have it's on until July 31. We're open Monday to Saturday. It's free admission, and I want to actually take this moment at the very beginning to emphasize a series of sponsors that have made this possible, and many from the broader philatelic world, including Cherrystone Auctions, Siegel Auctions, Schuyler Rumsey Auctions, and a number of other benefactors, many of them known in the greater philatelic world. And thank you to all of them and any of them that may be listening here. We could not have done this without you. We have worked very hard to make this a free exhibition to the public. We're approaching about 700 attendees over our first approximately week, a little bit over a week since we've been open. Let me give you a view of what the gallery looks like, and we'll get close up and start looking at some real objects. So this is a sense of what the gallery space looks like here at the Royal, and of course we're open, so there are members of the public here. And All right, so a little bit of the introduction of the Zulu War has already taken place in the introduction here, but I'm now going to attempt to talk about this story in brief, why it's significant, and with great emphasis on the postal objects. There are over 550 different objects here. I'm the co-curator, but I'm also the owner of the collection that you're about to see that's been on display. This is an effort that's been underway for 8.5 years, but my interest in the Zulu War goes back 26 years to when I was a child and saw a toy soldier diorama of one of the battles, and I was already a stamp collector at the time and budding philatelist, and put these two interests together in the years after that, and have basically, depending on how one thinks about collecting and the study of any given area, I moved well beyond the flat two-dimensional aspects of the postal world and have dived very deeply into every aspect, and from three-dimensional, non-postal, and more. So I'm going to, again, try to show each case to give everyone a sense of what's happening, and I'm going to emphasize and focus in on a few objects. So this very first case here is a look at the early Zulu kingdom that comes together about 200 years ago under the leadership of King Shaka. The objects that are in the focus here, a lot of them are three-dimensional objects. There's no written Zulu language, so they're not writing letters. There's no postal system the way we think about it, sort of in a European or Western context. So telling their story is all about the objects that are about their traditional life, ceremonial life. And so that's a big part of what we have to show here. But we do have some early images from the 1850s of watercolors from Europeans that had made their way to Zululand, and sort of early impressions of what Zulu life looked like. The two major postal items in this case are right here, this cover and letter, and this cover and letter, the first one with a stamp from Natal, and the next one from the Cape of Good Hope. And each of them is describing, interestingly, the same event that's taking place on the Zulu border with Natal, which was the area right next to Zululand. I'm going to actually zero in for a moment on this map to give everyone a sense of where we are. And I'm going to actually, one of the advantages of being able to give this tour is I'm going to open the case so I can give you all a much better view of it. There we go. So this is Southern Africa. And that's the Atlantic Ocean side. Here's the Indian Ocean side. Early European settlement is taking place in the Western area around Cape Town in the early 1600s. And by the early 19th century, the British have taken over from the Dutch and basically began a series of movements across Southern Africa that leads them to traditional Zululand, which is effectively the farthest east away from initial European settlement in South Africa in the 1600s. So by the time the colonial sort of movements come to the Zululand border, there is a very well-established Zulu kingdom. This second case, its focus is on the encroachment and sort of the coming of the white soldier, in this case, the British soldier. So it's a focus on a series of frontier wars that are fought in Central and Central East South Africa between the British and a number of different tribes, but in particular the Xhosa. And so we have, for example, stampless letters, covers letters that were sent during those frontier wars. So this is from the 7th Frontier War, 8th Frontier War, and then an example of combining the postal with the three-dimensional is here is a powder horn that was taken off of a Xhosa chief in the 7th Frontier War, and it was inscribed by the soldier that had taken it. And so again, connecting something very much about the description of his experience, but also on objects to make it all come together. And so this talks very much about the postal elements, but for the Q&A, I'm happy to chat about the combining of three-dimensional artifacts to tell a broader story. We talk about the exhibition as a artifact-driven experience versus or artifact-driven narrative versus a curator or curatorially driven narrative. The objective here is through the 550 plus objects to tell the story that we can tell and try to have it be as broad-based from as many perspectives as we can, but really to let the objects speak, to let them sort of drive that story. We have a number of postal items from telegraphs, covers, other letters, and a lot of this section right here is a focus on particular officers that were fighting in these frontier wars in the 1870s who would have a role in the Zulu War to come in 1879. So, for example, here is a letter from Henry Polaine. You'll hear about him in a bit of a moment. In the back of each of these cases are 1879 Anglo-Zulu War period regimental shields. This first one's particularly interesting. If you notice that you have this dark, big, large brown spot right here these are all from cowhides, and you have this white part of the hide that you can see on the right side of the shield. As I move to this next case, you'll notice that this is a very similar pattern. The large brown part of the shield on this side, and then a white spot on the right side. These are from the same regiment. Zulu shield patterns are distinguished by a number of characteristics, but basically the darker the shield coloring, the younger the regiment, the lighter or the closer to all white color, the older the regiment. So when chiefs are looking out across large expanses of warrior formations, you could tell much more easily based on the shield color and massing around what age and which discipline. So an older regiment would be more disciplined, but may not be as quick into the fight as a younger regiment. So you'd have varying elements of tactics and strategy related to, in this case, seeing far away, and those shield colorings would be very important. This third case is a focus on the incoming invasion. So really, really quick and in brief, and I apologize for having to do some of this sort of skipping over lots of details, but basically in the late 1870s, the home government in the UK sends down a capable administrator named Sir Bartle Frere. His charge was to create a confederation similar to what had occurred in Canada in the 1860s. In this case, to bring all of the disparate sort of colonial elements that are in Southern Africa at the time into one sort of single confederated or confederation arrangement, as I said, similar to what had happened in Canada. In so doing, he decides that his objective will be made much, much easier. I'm actually just going to make sure my lens is clear here. There we go. Made much, much easier if he can just remove the last independent African kingdom that's within Southern Africa, which again is on his far, far, far east, which is the Zulu kingdom under, at that time, a king named Cetshwayo. This is a case focused on the incoming portion of that war, along with the main general of imperial forces named Chelmsford. They decide they're going to instigate a war with the Zulus, and before news gets back and to England, and then a response from England back to them, that they will basically have finished off the Zulus. They, were probably going to be very similar to the other tribes they'd fought, which they had a lot of experience with. And they realized, but at the same time, totally overestimated their capabilities because the Zulus had age regiments from high teens all the way to men into their 50s that were all in effectively a large national guard called up by the king. And as this is coming together, a series of actions are taking place. I'm just going to focus on the postal here for a moment. This is a cover sent on the border of Natal in late December 1878, just a few days before the invasion of Zululand would get underway, and a countersign to receive free, because the military post on Her Majesty's service, to receive free postage. This is a Captain George Wardell of the 24th. And I'll mention him again in a moment. There's a letter here written by Bishop Colenso, an Anglican bishop of Natal, who was very anti-war and understood what was happening, could see the instigation in the late 1878, and really was trying very hard to stop it. So the invasion gets underway in early January 1879. And this is the fourth case, and the focus here is sort of the initial invasion and the Battle of Isandlwana. If any of you have seen Zulu Dawn or have any familiarity with this war, Isandlwana will ring for you quite loudly. This is the Isandlwana Mountain. This is a period photograph after the major battle that will take place there. In the gallery, in order to use all the space we have available to us, we also included Isandlwana Mountain, 3 different views of it. This is just one example here to give greater context to the attendee that's physically in this space of what they're seeing. Basically, what occurs is the Zululand is invaded by the British in 3 columns. The central column goes right into the center, headed east. The goal is to approach the Zulu capital and to get the Zulu army to commit to the field. The British, with advanced weaponry for that period, single shot, Martini Henry rifles. The Zulus have antiquated rifles and muskets at best. Most of it is shield, spears, and so forth. These are items, covers, and their associated letters written by a British officer named Anstey. And this is from the 5th of January. And this one is also, this is from just a couple of days later, right into the invasion. He's writing to his father, right from the field, and saying, hey, the invasion's underway, and hopefully we'll bring this all to a quick close, and we'll have a chance to fight before it's all over. So the British come into the field and basically camp at this mountain about 10 days into the invasion. And at that point, they were still trying to figure out where the main body of the Zulu army was. And so, again, really skipping over lots of details, the British commander who was with that central column, General Chelmsford, splits his forces to go after what he believes to be the Zulu army to his southeast, when in fact the majority of the Zulu army, more than 25,000 warriors, were much closer to his northeast. After the force has been split, several hours later, the Zulu army, which much closer to the Romanian encampment, about 2,000-ish imperial soldiers and auxiliaries and colonial troops that were there, camping, waiting for the general to call them up to advance to the position where the general had gone with the other half of the force. The Zulu army is discovered. They rise up and they rush the field. It's a multi-mile long battlefield, so it's a huge expanse. And basically, the British did not realize what was coming down on them, and they had spread their forces out too thin. And by the time, with a series of setbacks to the Zulus from the field of fire that the British brought down on them, eventually overwhelmed the firing lines as well as the camp. I talked in this earlier case about Captain Wardell. 3 weeks after he sent this envelope, he would be killed up here and was found later, many months later, with his men in that portion of the field. Lieutenant Anstey would also be killed down here. This is the telegram sent to his father in England in February, confirming the likelihood that his son had been killed. Here's another telegram of another officer, confirmation that his son had been killed. When the British, our initial attack begins at 10:30 in the morning, approximately, and ends in the 2 o'clock time range in the afternoon. About 1,700 British soldiers and colonial troops had been killed. The single greatest defeat of a British field force to that point in the Victorian era, and really one of the most dramatic defeats at the hands of a non-mechanized army in British military history. So it is a dramatic part of this war, and clearly was not the intention of the colonial administrators to be able to start a war quickly, sort of remove this, what they perceived to be their sort of last major threat on their border, and instead a major disaster had befallen the British Army. A series of other three-dimensional objects are here. Again, not going to focus as much on those, aside from the postal objects, but happy to come back during the Q&A and focus on anything that hits anyone or is intriguing to anyone. Moving on, if anyone has seen the movie Zulu with Michael Caine, it was his very first feature film as a featured star. It is about what occurs a few hours after the Battle of Assandawana. So this major defeat, major victory by the Zulu army has taken place. About 3,500 Zulu warriors and 4 regiments that had not participated in the main part of the battle at Assandawana that morning, early afternoon, decide they're going to cross into Natal, which was expressly forbidden by the Zulu king, who wanted to fight a purely defensive war. And they attack a mission station that had been turned into a makeshift hospital and supply depot by British forces in Zululand, called Rorke's Drift, named after Jim Rourke, who had set it up years earlier. In one of the dioramas we have here, this is a focus on the Battle of Rorke's Drift and sort of different parts of the battle and sequences of the battle. I'm not going to walk you through all elements of it. All I have to say is that if you've seen the movie Zulu, Zulu is accurate in that there was a battle on the 22nd into the 23rd of January at a place called Rorke's Drift. There was an officer named John Chard, played by Stanley Baker, and one named Gonville Bromhead, played by Michael Caine. And there were varying other characters that were real participants of the battle. Approximate timing-ish is correct, but that's otherwise troop movements and other elements of the battle are sort of Hollywood at its best. But the outcome, which is that these 140-ish British soldiers there against 3,500 Zulu warriors. Lasted from about 4:30 in the afternoon until about 2 o'clock in the morning, when the Zulu Army regiment sort of stopped their sort of lighter attacks. By that point, they were exhausted after a whole day where they'd come from Isandawana and come over many miles and swam an overflowing river, and spent 10 hours attacking the British position. There are a series of significant objects, and actually some of the most significant postal objects are in this section on the Rorke's Drift. This is a letter written by Gonville Bromhead, who's played by Michael Caine in the movie. This is a picture of a period photograph of Bromhead. He's writing from Rorke's Drift after the battle to his sister, and he mentions about how they have not seen much of their friends, the Zulus, recently, but there are events bringing the war to an end. This is a postcard. It's the written side. The postal part is on the other side, written by Ammunition Smith, who was famous for passing out ammunition along the barricades at Rorke's Drift. And he's talking about how that he was not able to write in the preceding months to the recipient, because the Zulus had carried off with some of his kit, and then the rest had been burned in the Battle of Rorke's Drift. So pretty dramatic reference specifically to his inability to write while he was on campaign. This is after he's returned. This cross-hatched written letter and its accompanying cover is two of the most dramatic objects here, especially postal objects. And the first time they've been on display, they came from the family of Captain Harrison, who's the recipient. They're written by Colonel Glynn, who was one of the senior officers with the Central Column. He had gone out with the commanding general and had been away from Isandawana with the split force, and had come back to find his fellow officers and the men that he had been in charge of and commanded slaughtered. This is a letter written from Rorke's Drift immediately after the battle. It's not sent on the 29th of January. You can see at the very top up here. I'm actually going to get my keys out again and get a little bit closer here. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. We're doing this again on the 27th, and hopefully I'll be a little more fluid by then. But I always trying different things has hiccups and other elements to it. So it's also, if anyone wants to see something during the Q&A, as best I can, I'm happy to come in and take a closer look at any objects. So to get a sense of this letter, so written from dateline from Rorke's Drift, 29th January. Now, Glynn's, all of his kit would have been destroyed and carried off by the Zulus at Rorke's Drift, at Isandawana. So this is a particularly scarce piece of paper that he is using with this small envelope here. And he's writing to a fellow officer who had fought with him for many years previously and served with him in the 24th. And in this letter, he describes both battles and lists all of the men, all of their fellow officers that had been killed, and the actions of both battles in a single letter and with its accompanying cover. There are other letters that are known, written by participants of the Battle of Rorke's Drift, but not with their covers. So one of the sort of more dynamic and interesting postal objects. This is a letter down here written by John Chard, who's played by Stanley Baker in the movie. So this is written later in the campaign, but from Zululand. A series of other artifacts that were at the battle related to participants and other elements. So lots to show here, and happy to come back in the Q&A. But the Battle of Rorke's Drift is dramatic history, and it's without the movie Zulu, it's not clear that much would be nearly as of interest to historians today, because it really brought the whole Zulu War back into the public consciousness 90 plus years after it had dropped out. If you've seen Zulu Dawn with, hold on a second, just putting this case back together. If you've seen Zulu Dawn, which came out in the 1970s with Burt Lancaster and Peter O'Toole, that is about the Battle of Isandawana, sort of a prequel to Zulu. All right, so next case here we have is the reaction back home. Again, the home government did not anticipate or plan or get permission for any of this to take place. A series of major postal items bring this story to life. First is a letter written by the wife of the master of the royal household, sort of like the chief operating officer of the royal family. And it's written on February 11th to her mother, at describing the immediate reaction in the royal court when Queen Victoria and the royal household discover or hear about the news, because by February 11th is when the news first hit England. And there we are. And then she's describing the news and also commenting about her cousin, Henry Polaine. I showed an item earlier here in the lead up, and there he is. And Henry Polaine had been the senior officer at Isandawana on that day, and he had been killed. But at that point, they don't know the outcome of what has occurred. And so just amazing that, again, that a relative related and who had been killed in the Zulu War, that one of the very first people in England to hear about it would be his cousin, and would be there right when Queen Victoria and the whole royal household is here. And this letter, a postal artifact, is this directly attributable item and element that was physically there at that exact moment. I haven't mentioned this, but really, as I'm talking, hundreds of people have now come and seen the exhibition, and many of them have no previous connection with philately or postal history in any way. And the objective here is to cross-pollinate these interests and to show people that the postal artifact is in itself a significant category to understanding and to being a part of and connecting with this history. And I talk about how just how letters and covers and postmarks, this dating of something and its location and being able to tell exactly where something was at a certain time. There are very few categories of artifacts, especially related to military history, that are as directly attributable to a place and time as a letter and its envelope. This is right down here is on one of the earliest newspapers. This is printed in the colony of Natal, immediately next to Zululand, and interestingly sent with a 1 penny Natal stamp to England, a recipient in England, but it has one of the very first accounts of the Battle of Isandlwana, as well as the defensive preparations in the colony. The colony of Natal did not know if the Zulu army was going. They already attacked Rorke's though they had been unsuccessful. They did not know if the Zulu army would come back with an interest to invade other parts of the colony or cause other havoc. So there was all these defensive preparations that were underway in the colony, and a great deal of panic. This is a special envelope right here that was drawn up to carry a handwritten telegram, which is right here in the back over here, to Captain Harrison, the recipient of that very dramatic letter I described related to Rorke's Drift, and basically telling him and his garrison to sort of watch their backs because it's possible the Zulus might invade. This is one of the most dramatic illustrated covers. And Tony, there's a catalog, a book of the exhibition that we'll post a link if anyone's interested to get. Where we'll definitely post that. I see your question coming through here. This is an envelope illustrated right after the news is hit. This is sent on February 17th from England. Interestingly, back to South Africa, the newspapers had only published what had occurred at Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift on February 12th. So it's just 5 days after the news is hit. And actually, it's a Zulu warrior with his arm pushing the Queen Victoria depicted stamp with the caption that says, get out of my way. And so really a dramatic kind of push, emphasizing that the British very much understood the Zulus had greatly repulsed what had occurred. Lots of other artifacts that, again, I'm skipping over quite quickly here. This next section is a focus on the reinvasion. The British, though they had not authorized it, decide they were going to send a reinvasion force to sort of finish what they had started and to avenge the deaths of all of England's sons and Welsh sons and Irish. There was men from all over the UK that were in these regiments that had fought and died there. Just a quick comment from a collector's perspective. The very first postal item I ever bought was this cover right here, a simple cover. This is actually where I'm going to stop for a moment and talk about the postal rates. They're not particularly exciting during this period, but if your officers paid 6 pennies to send a single weight letter out of the field, and in this case, the 6 pennies due, and indicating at the very top, no stamps available, but they had to sign their name and their regiment and indicate on active service in Zululand, and again, no stamps available. So that's an example of a postage due 6 penny. There's another example here of a 6 penny. I will now take you to an example of a 6 penny where it is paid by postage. So there's a 6 penny Natal stamp down here. Another example again of a piece of mail sent back, in this case to Ireland. Another example of a 6 penny. These are all different examples of mail sent by officers that were part of the reinvasion forces that was coming into Zululand in February, March, and April, and into May of 1879. Here is an example of a 1 penny, which was a private soldier's, so non-officer concessionary rate, so a less expensive postage rate. And they had to, in order to receive the rate, they had to sign their name, had to sign it, who it's coming from, had to have their commanding officer countersign, and that's occurring down here in the bottom left right here. And so with a 1 penny prepayment, and as an example, it could also occur as a postage due. So this one is a member of private of the Frontier Light Horse, a trooper of the Frontier Light Horse, and it is countersigned by his commanding officer, Redvers Buller, who would receive a Victoria Cross at the Battle of Kobane, and for rescuing fellow soldiers. And he would go on to become quite famous in the Boer War as well. So signed by Redvers Buller before he receives his Victoria Cross to allow this trooper to receive that 1 penny concessionary rate. And if you think about it, it's a big discount. 6 pennies, very expensive. So that 1 penny made a big difference. Based on where the mail was going to go, this, for example, is a 1 penny concessionary rate, but paid with a Transvaal stamp, which is sort of on the border in the northern part of Zululand. So, based on where the regiment was and where the mail was going to go into the normal or natural postal system, that depended on which prepayment or which stamp you would use, Natal versus Transvaal. And this is an example of a Transvaal 6 penny paid by an officer. This is sent by an officer, Lieutenant Harwood of the 80th Regiment. He would eventually be court-martialed for abandoning his troops at a battle called Ntombe. And this is a diorama of that battle. I'm not going to go into the details of it here. Basically, the British had a supply wagon train that got stuck in an overflowing river, and the Zulus had spotted them and were watching them sort of stuck there, realized they made for quite an attractive target to come after, and they did. And so Lieutenant Harwood, that cover I just showed, was sent after the battle, but before he would be court-martialed, which is just an interesting, again, postal artifact from this particular officer. Another item related to John Chard, again, writing to a senior Royal Engineer officer while he's awaiting the reinvasion to get underway, and basically he's talking about, when are we going to actually get this underway? Next up, we come to a bizarre story of the Zulu War, which focuses on the Prince Imperial. So Napoleon III is deposed in 1871 as Emperor of France, and he doesn't immediately come. He's imprisoned in France, but his wife, the Empress Eugenie, and their young son, Louis Napoleon, make their way to England, and where they stay in exile, basically. The Prince Imperial, or Louis Napoleon, goes to a British military academy for training. Here's an example of him. That's a picture of what he looks like while he's there. This is a leave slip sign filled out by the prince requesting leave over the weekend. He would hear, of course, of the news. Everyone heard of the news of what had occurred to the British forces. This is at the Battle of Ascendawan about the reinvasion. This is an envelope, and it's a company letter written by the Prince Imperial. At this point, his father has died, so he is Napoleon IV, leader of a government in exile of a sort. And he's writing on Windsor Castle stationery. Well, him and his mother were guests of Queen Victoria in 1878. Now, just imagine how, 70 years earlier, while the British and, Europe are fighting the Napoleon I and the French imperial armies all over the world. And here, just effectively a generation and a half, 2 generations later, descendants of Napoleon I are guests of Queen Victoria and writing on Windsor Castle stationery. So again, the postal artifact really drives home the dramatic nature of this connection between the Napoleons and the British royal family. He would go down to Zululand as a favor of Queen Victoria, provided him as an observer with the reinvasion force. And this is a photograph of his body. He was killed when he went on a patrol that he should not have gone on. They waited much longer by a homestead than they should have, and they found themselves basically overwhelmed by a Zulu patrol, and he was killed. So the answer to where the last basically major direct descendant of the Napoleonic emperors die, and the answer is in Zululand. So I'm recognizing that I'm coming up on time here, and I really want to have the opportunity to answer questions. The next cases are focused on basically the reinvasion finishes into the Battle of Ulundi, which is on July 4th, 1879. So the war begins in early January and ends at the Battle of Ulundi on July 4th. They basically surround the Zulu capital and have a final battle, sort of finishing off the Zulu army. The king, Cetshwayo, escapes, and he is captured at the end of August. So there's a series of letters, postal items, London Illustrated newses sent through the mail, including one to Canada with the news of the burning of the Zulu capital. A series of 3-dimensional artifacts and other objects, a flag of truce. So lots of non-postal items, but also a big range of postal items, all related to different elements of this final battle. This next case, number 10, is a focus on the costs of war. The parents that went, including the Empress and Eugenie, who went down to Zululand to visit the final resting places of their sons. And so these are focus on the letters and accompanying envelopes written by Lord Scott Douglas, who was a member of the House of Lords, whose son had been killed in Zululand, and other dramatic elements of the medical corps and so forth. This basically is the Zulu king is captured, taken to Cape Town Castle, and is kept there until 1882. He receives visitors to Cape Town Castle. So there, and he was trying to persuade the Europeans that visit him to advocate in his behalf, as well as lobbying the home government and the British government to let him plead his case, and he is successful. So these are pictures of him in Cape Town Castle right there, for example, and that's an example of what the interior of the castle looked like. This is a permission to visit the king in 1882, and this is the only letter that anyone is aware of signed by the king. The only English script he learned how to write in a rote format was his name, Setuweo, right there. And these are other examples of that signature of his that he wrote. Other postal objects related to other elements of his life, including when he comes to England in the summer of 1882, meets Queen Victoria, and the government agrees to put him back on the throne, allow him to return to the throne of the Zulu kingdom. And so the question, as I look back on all these cases, just at the sadness of all this, is really, what is the point? What was the point from the very beginning to have had all this bloodshed and all this sort of terror rain down on the civilians and everyone in Zululand in particular, and all these young men in the British Army and the Imperial forces that had nothing to do with instigating this war, to just have now the Zulu king's going to go back and be put back on the throne. Anyway, a lot more to discuss on that front. So this case is a focus on the 1883 to 1906 period. There were a series of rebellions and other sort of uprisings, including the one final one, 1906. And this is a focus on the story of what comes there. Of the King Cetshwayo dies, his son Dinizulu becomes king, and his story and what happens to him, including being tried by the British and sent to St. Helena, which is, for anyone that knows their Napoleon history, is exactly where he was sent as well at the end. So lots of interesting connections with the Zulu royal family, or just eerie sort of parallels, and the Napoleon family. This is a whole case focused on legacy of the British participants, legacy of the Zulu participants. I'll focus on just one object. There are so many in this case, lots and lots of different things to focus on. But this is a letter exchange between an administrator named James Stewart in Zululand in the 1920s and the then Zulu king. And they are discussing the importance of Stewart's work to take the oral history that he was gathering and writing down. He was a fluent Zulu speaker and writer, taking all of this oral history and getting it into a written format. Stewart would spend something like 30 years doing this, and then another person would follow his work to translate from the oral history that Zulu had that Stewart had put into writing, but it was in Zulu, and translating it into English. And the Zulu king is commending and talking to Stewart about how important this effort is and how he wants to continue helping Stewart's efforts. So here's a letter of a Zulu king writing in Zulu to a white colonial administrator, and is emphasizing the importance of taking this oral history and putting it into writing. So again, this connection of sort of where do we think about letters and all these other pieces and how important that really is. So the final case here is an element of legacy. So the movies, of course, are a focus of Zulu and Zulu Dawn, and then a series of objects related to Zulu traditional cultural life and Zululand today. So there's still 8 to 9 million Zulus living in Southern Africa and South Africa. And so they're very much a part of the fabric of modern South Africa today. A few fun postal items here is an envelope that was sent with some promotional materials for Zulu Dawn, and with this dramatic illustration printed on the front of the envelope. And here is a ticket for the opening of Zulu in Bangkok, Thailand, with some Thai tax stamps. And here is a deck of playing cards, and this one still has the tax wrapper around it. So with that, I went to sort of I did a decent job, Joan, I hope, of sort of just giving an overview of what this is all about, and would love to take questions, dive into anything. And I really went quickly through it to give everyone a sense of what's here, especially because I would love if anyone's in the UK are able to attend to, of course, come in person. It was a pleasure to do this tour. This is the first tour of any kind we've done in this sort of digital, virtual capacity. And it's never as good as seeing the real objects in person. So again, I invite you to come, but would please, Joan, if you could field questions, I'd love to answer whatever's come up.
Sure. I'm going to have Rob start that while I bring people over. If you'd like
Great.
priority coming over, raise your hand because I know some people are working. And Alex, this was fantastic. I'm looking forward. The chatter was pretty good about how nicely this went off. But let me not take any more time. I'm going to turn it over to Rob. And Rob, if you could just start the questions while I bring people over.
Thanks, Joan. Yeah, that was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I enjoyed that very much. Question here from Carl Barna. He'd like to know, what are the dimensions of the shields and what are the little cross hatchings on the front? What do they indicate?
It's a deck. Yeah. So let's take a look at one of those to just give some perspective. So again, it's a decorative element. It's a style more than anything of a Zulu shield. But it's basically, it's an interwoven piece of hide brought in. Actually, I have a Zulu shield. I brought one here. So if this question came up, this is what the back of a Zulu shield looks like. So there would be this stick sort of to give it heft into something to hold on to. There were typically basically a part of hide, sort of the handle to hold. And then so you can see what the weaving sort of looks like in the back right here. But it's basically a tanned hide to make hard. It was not meant to stop bullets. It was meant as an offensive weapon. So you would hold the shield in one hand and you have a spear in the other, and you'd use it in close order combat to be able to knock your opponent off kilter. And then of course to use whether it be a knob carry club to hit them or a spear to stab them. So that's the nature of the shields with the cross hatching.
All right. So that doesn't necessarily show anything about rank.
It does not. The shields were not, well, rank only by age. By the older regiments, the married regiments were more senior in their status in Zulu society, but there were not like officers in the same way. There were sort of chiefs in Kosi, but not rank in the way that the British or Western armies had rank.
Right. Only the coloration on the shield showed like the level of soldier, I guess.
Correct. Sort of the age of the regiment, or sort of correct.
Right. Carl also asks, how did you build this collection?
It's a great. There's in some respects I would love to come back and maybe if I haven't worn out my welcome by the time I do this a second time, maybe it's a great talk for another time, because I would love to actually not only talk in depth about how I put this together, but also try to give some ideas to folks that are watching this that maybe are collecting just postal items for whatever their area of interest. And it would have always been interested to sort of maybe dive into another area that is related or supplemental or would help create greater context for their own understanding of the postal artifacts. But the real in brief is that I went to other fields and other parts of other collecting worlds, including the ephemera world, tribal artifacts worlds, military collecting, traveled extensively here in the UK to go to different fairs. Of course, the internet, the classic eBay. I found some, that deck of cards I showed at the end of the talk, I found on eBay. So just amazing what you can still find anywhere. Most of the objects here, including the postal objects, are not from traditional sources. Sorry, the postal objects are not from traditional sources. Maybe less than about a quarter of the postal artifacts on display here are from philatelic postal dealers and auction houses. So most of it came from non-philatelic sources, the ephemera world and the military world, as well as direct family sources. The Harrison letters and some of the really key artifacts came out of some scrapbooks and things before they'd ever been seen publicly. So this is the first time that much of it has been seen by the public in some form. And a lot of the three-dimensional artifacts, it's luck, searching, trying to find connections, letting enough people know what you're interested in without trying to tell the world, so that you don't become a market maker and raise the price and everything. I'll show one example to the person who just asked that, of probably the two of my favorite items here. This right here is a theater program that was done for charity to raise money for the widows and orphans of the non-commissioned officers and privates who lost their lives at Isandula, 319 of them being Irish, many of whom were Corkmen. So this is in Ireland. And here's another one at St. George's Hall. This is on the 3rd of May, 1879, in aid of the Isandula Widows and Orphans Fund. These are, I've never found another. If anyone comes up with another one, please let me know. I went to an ephemera fair and was happened to just be chatting with a dealer that focuses just on musical programs and theater programs of the 17th, 18th and 19th centuries. And I said, oh, I'm interested, in the Zulu War, and I'm interested in military themes, is what I said. I don't even think I mentioned Zulu War. And then she goes, oh, actually, I've got a little folder of military related programs. And she pulls out this little folder, and these were inside of it. So these are by far more rare from a perspective of scarcity and impact than most of the postal items I have. But they came from a wholly different world. But they give, again, just like the postal artifact, they are of a moment, of a time, of an emotion, of a connection that you can that an object can create for trying to give better understanding of what this all was about, or attempt to give a better understanding of what it was all about. So the answer to how do you put this all together, it's means, inclination, passion, and a willingness to sort of search the ends of the earth and to go into places that you would not think would have something related to your area of interest, but you just got to give it a try.
Oh, fascinating. Alex, have you personally visited any of the historical sites in South Africa?
I have. I first went in 2017 on a tour led by Ian Knight, who's my co-curator here. He's in the room nearby. If anyone is interested, by the way, please reach out to the exhibition. It's just Clash of Empires with an S 2023 at gmail.com. Clash of Empires 2023.com or at gmail.com. And I'll send some information along if you're interested in yourselves to go to the battlefields. Ian was an amazing guide and provided tremendous connection and understanding on the field themselves. I've been down there for 2 other times. I was actually supposed to go for my 4th trip down to the battlefields and to Zululand in 2020, and then lockdown occurred about 5 days before my flight was supposed to take off, so I didn't end up going. But one of the places I went actually is to Fort Harrison. I was talking about this telegram that was sent. I'll go back and show it. This telegram that was sent to Captain Harrison, and so it's right here. It's at Captain Harrison. It references Fort Harrison on the St. Johns River. It was an earthworks fort that was only there for about 18 months. And if we, along with a friend, figured out approximately where it was up the St. Johns River and went on one hell of an adventure into a very remote part of the colony next to traditional Zululand. And this is a period map done by Harrison of the fort itself. And we found the approximate outline of where the fort was. And there was one photograph of the fort, thankfully, that still survives. And using the context of the background of the rock formations in the distance, we were able to sort of get ourselves up high and figure out exactly where we should be looking in this totally overgrown area that, this has been returned to wild. So anyways, the answer is yes, I've been there a couple of times, and anyone that's interested in going, please let me know. I would love to, send you there.
Oh, excellent. Kind of an unusual question here from Carl Barna. How tall were the typical British and the Zulu fighters?
Great question. Before I answer that, I'm going to draw on my colleague now. Mr. Knight, may I borrow you? There's a question that I think you would be excellent to answer. Please. Okay. So here we'll do it. We'll have you're going to be on the front of the camera. Here we go. So this is my co-curator, Ian Knight. And the question that was received is, how tall approximately was the average British and Zulu soldier warriors at the time?
Gosh, that's interesting. I think the British Army at the time did have a minimum height requirement, which was, I'm going out on record here without looking this up, so I may be wrong, but it was something like 5'4". Probably the average height in those days was about sort of 5'6", round about there. Zulu's probably a little bit taller, possibly not as tall as 6 foot, just simply looking at, nutrition and all the rest of it. But on average, maybe were just a little bit taller than their British counterparts, and of course look so when they're wearing feather headdresses and all the rest of it. There's a bit of a myth that the Zulus were huge, great men, 7 feet tall. I think they looked that way to terrified British soldiers at times during the war, and that wasn't the case. On the whole, pretty sort of similar, but the Zulus might have had the edge.
Thank you.
Okay,
Excellent.
hope that helps.
Yeah, this is one of the advantages of also coming to the exhibition is that we're here waiting for you to answer questions live and in person. So thank you for that question. What's next?
All right, now we've got Don Chenevert Jr. with a question.
Alex,
Whoop.
covers to
Sorry.
have the black border on them.
Sorry, your question was to tell about the covers with the black border?
Yes.
Yes, yes. So so the black border and on both envelopes and stationery of this period and into the 20th century was a, let me show some examples here. So here with these black bordered envelopes, as well as the stationery, was a sign of mourning. They're known as sort of mourning covers and mourning stationery in terms of the sadness over the loss of a loved one. And so, for example, all of these are examples of Lord Scott Douglas's stationery that he'd had with him on the journey to go visit his son's grave. And so they're all this black lined paper indicating to the recipients, in this case, his family members, as I'm sure they were also using mourning stationery about the loss of their son. So yeah, no, it's thank you for the question, for having me pointed out, but it's other elements here. This is a package label, also with that black outline. This is written in Queen Victoria's hand to the Empress Eugenie, and both of them, Queen Victoria was in an even longer period of mourning related to Prince Albert's death many, many years earlier, and it sort of was in mourning for the rest of her life as a result. And anyway, so she was always using mourning stationery in some form, but the Empress, in the same way, would so as well after the death of both her husband at that point and then tragically her son. Yeah, thank you for the point.
You bet.
All right. All right. Are there any other questions in the audience? Douglas Nethercraft.
Would it be possible to see into the cabinet where the letter from Chetweo was? I think it was stand number 10.
Oh yeah, no, I got the key right in front of me. This is like we're making it happen. We're live somewhere, and it's like not even the power. There's no PowerPoint presentation. I got the real thing right here. And let's take a look. What's your question? What can I point out?
It looked like an illustrated envelope that was on the same shelf or nearby in color.
Yeah. Yep. Hold on. Yep. So it's down. So let me get back there. So there's a focus on some illustrated envelopes, which are all from the same correspondence. I'll come down here. So these are related to his visit to England, and this one is basically saying, the return of the king, and it's showing Chetweo in sort of very stereotypically sort of racist image of him sort of returning, even with banjo and his shield and sort of Western dress. But interestingly, the same writer, and this is being sent from England, and it's sent right before the king has arrived in England. Interestingly, so it's actually anticipating that the king is on. He knows that he's coming. That he's going to return, sort of even more civilized, quote unquote, if that means anything, afterwards. And then just a few months later, the same writer sends this envelope to the same recipient, and in it, it's the Zulu king throwing off the Western clothes with his shield, keeping his shield and his spear. And the caption that just says, "I think I can do without him." So very interesting. There's a fascinating current that runs through this story of the British public's, a tremendous amount of anti-war sentiment, and they're very, very upset by sort of what was felt to be just a totally unnecessary war. And when the Zulu king came to England, There was a parade. I have a letter here describing, I'm trying to think where it is. It's over here. A letter describing the parade that the Zulu king had. He, at the house where he stayed in London, he came out twice a day on a balcony to cheering crowds. I mean, they wanted to see who this king that had successfully maneuvered an army and defeated their forces. And there was a lot of, I don't know if sympathy is the right word, but just a lot of interest in the king, but interest that was positive, not angry sympathy. This is a puzzle that was done and sold at the time of the king's visit, sort of parts of the life of King Cetshwayo. And here he is meeting Queen Victoria in the bottom. And then there are other elements. Let's see what's a good example of just the Zulu. The British had tremendous respect for the Zulu people and army. Afterwards, they named multiple warships. Here's examples of the varying HMS Zulus at varying times in British military history. So there's lots of interesting connections that come out of the Zulu War and that are not, well, the war itself was very negative and very destructive, and there's nothing positive for the Zulus from that perspective. But that we have a letter here for the exhibition written by Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, who's just about to turn 95. He played his great-grandfather in the movie Zulu. If any of you have seen Zulu, here is Prince Buthelezi, and he played his great-grandfather, King Cetshwayo, in the movie. He's one of the few actors, along with Michael Caine, that's still alive from that 1964 film. And in his letter, which he writes as a letter of welcome for the exhibition, and he did a video welcome for us as well, which is on YouTube. If you go to the YouTube channel, it's been posted here, you'll see his video welcome. So we're just truly honored, and it's just incredible. Probably one of the greatest things I'll ever have in my collection is the signed letter from Prince Buthelezi about the exhibition. And in his letter, he talks about the dramatic and tragic history, but it is a shared history between the Zulu people and the British people. And so today, none of us are responsible for bringing about the Zulu War or fighting in it, but it is our responsibility in a way to remember and understand it. And that's a big part of what our focus is here, is not just to talk about the war itself and, in the war ends and that's like as if that's the end of history, but rather to have a whole focus in an exhibition on who are the Zulus, why are they important, what did they do in their own right, what the war did to them, what their successes, and of course what the tragedy of the end of the war does for the Zulus, but then that the war goes on. There's a civil war, there's further rebellions, there's legacy that matters, there's ongoing Zulu traditions. So these illustrated covers are one of many different ways that the British public and individuals in this case made the Zulu War very much a part of their sort of the folk art of that period. This third one, by the way, just to answer your question even more thoroughly, this was sent in the fall of 1879 after the war was over. But I found the Punch magazine illustration. It's in the exhibition catalog if anyone does buy it. It's which we will ship to you, of course. That actually this is done as a right after an existing cartoon that looks just like that in Punch magazine that was published about a week before. So trying to find the inspiration for some of these illustrations has also been a mission of mine for many years. I've had those for a long time. Thank you for that question. I realize I veered off in a couple different directions, but there's just so much to show you. I have a piece of mail sent to Zulu, Texas, a very small, now dead post office in the United States. So there are Zulu connections in the United States related to this war.
Thank you, Alex, so much for your passion, and the format of the display works so well.
Oh, thank you. Well, just a final comment. There have been some links that have been posted. Thank you, Joan, for doing that. If you're interested in the exhibition catalog, we have a hardback. All the proceeds are benefiting the Royal Philatelic Society London. We have a hardback with 372 pages, which includes every artifact that you've seen here. Every artifact on display is in the catalog with full description, narrative, context, write-ups, as well as articles from 21 other authors from the Napoleonic Wars, Prince Imperial to World War I, other military history topics, basically giving other thoughts and ideas around the context and collecting and study of many different areas of history from Africa and other areas. We also have a soft, that's at 45 pounds, and we will ship worldwide. And we have a soft cover version. It's actually a 2-volume, which is all the content of the hardcover, but just in 2 books, which is 25 pounds. And we'd love anyone that's interested in multi-category collecting or understanding more of what this is all about and how I put it together. There's an article in there about that as well. We'd love for you to get the catalog. So please, it's on the Royal Hotel site, London's gift shop or online shop. We'd love for you to have a copy. And thank you. Thank you for your questions. Thank you, Joan. Really appreciate this. I think there is a social time maybe where everyone's going to get let in. I won't go anywhere.
They're
But
in.
Oh, great. Oh, hello. I'm sorry. I'm on my
They
phone.
are in. And those of you, I noticed now that they're saying you could decline coming over. That's new. Unfortunately, I can't remember who declined, so I apologize for bugging you. But if I did forget you and you want to come over, please raise your hand and I will bring you over. Ronnie Glass, you have a question, but before you do, my husband's here, and unfortunately, well, I have to give it priority. So
Hi,
Keith,
Keith.
go ahead and.
Hi there. How many Victoria Crosses were awarded for the battle at, I think it's Broad Strip?
And here
There were. Yep. Sorry. What were you saying, Keith? You said how many Victoria Crosses were awarded at the Battle of Rorke's Drift? Oh, sorry. Just to repeat the question, please. Oh.
We could get back to you on that. Listen, we won't
So-
quiz him. Ronnie Glass.
Hi, thank you. That was so fascinating. First question, have you been to KwaZulu-Natal?
Yes,
The
I have. Yep, I have been to the KwaZulu-Natal, to the battlefields, as well as other parts of traditional Zululand. Yes.
Because there are many tours organized, but this was really so utterly fascinating. And then just to give an update to everybody about the Zulu Kingdom, our immediate, if I didn't say so, I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. Our immediate past president, Jacob Zuma, is a Zulu. And the Zulus are actually the dominant African tribe. They are the majority African tribe. So the Zulu wars were against a very important aspect of a very important tribe, and the Zulus have continued to play a huge role in South Africa. And it was just to bring it up to date over the last 150 years. My
Yes,
third
thank you.
point is I'm a member of the military history societies here in South Africa. How long is this exhibition on, and have you been approached to present this to any South African sources?
Well, so the answer is the exhibition is live and open to the public until July 31. So the rest of this month. If you send me an email, again, just it's Clash of Empires 2023 at gmail.com. I'd be happy to do one of these for you and the other members of any of the military postal history group in South Africa. So yeah, I'm happy. We want to show this to the world, and if you can't come here in person, happy to show it in this form, and we can focus on any aspect that you like. So I appreciate your kind feedback.
Yeah, and I would be very happy to, if you need any technical help, more than happy to do that.
Thank you. So in other words, you haven't been approached by any other military society in South Africa?
Not in South Africa, no.
Thank you. Okay,
Sure.
I shall follow up.
Great.
Alex,
Yeah, please let me know.
there was another question here. It said, is there a Martini Henry rifle on display?
So the only firearm on exhibit actually is the one I'm about to pass over. So good question, good timing. This is a Swinburne Henry carbine used for mounted troops that was marked to the Natal Mounted Police and possibly picked up off the battlefield at Isandlwana. It certainly was used by the Natal Mounted Police at that period. The Martini Henry looks approximately like this, but is just a bit longer. The carbine is a shorter gun, but fires basically a very similar cartridge. And no, I do not have one on display because I do not own a attributable. And they're very difficult. They're very, very hard to have attributable Martini Henry rifles that were actually can be connected to being used or in the Zulu War specifically. So what I have is the one example of, it's a very similar breech loading mechanism as the Martini Henry. So it sort of serves that purpose of just showing an example of what the breech loaders looked like at the time.
Mhm.
Thank you for that question.
How do the Zulus feel today about that battle?
Oh, which one? This Sandawana or Rorke's Drift, or all of them?
The total of it.
Yeah. So I'll pair it a little bit on from what I was at the token American as part of the British delegation at the 140th anniversary commemoration events in 2019, overseen by the Zulu King, and they have a commemoration event every year on January 22nd to commemorate their victory at the Battle of the Sandawana. I would say they are incredibly proud to have played that role in the history of Africa as it relates especially to pushing back against sort of white European encroachment on traditional lands. And the Sandawana and the success of the Zulus there has been used by many African leaders having nothing to do with the Zulu kingdom as a symbol of that pushback against European aggression, in the colonial period or imperial period of that time. So I would say they are very proud of their ancestors' place in history as a result. But overall, it is a sad. I mean, there's much sadness about what it meant for the people and how clearly they believe that they would be their whole community, nation, kingdom would be certainly far stronger if they had not had to have fought that war and to have lost and what it meant for them. So it's a mixed reaction, but I would say overall they certainly know that without it they would not have their place in history, would not have the connection to the British people as a singular tribe. Most people, if you can name any African tribe, Zulu is probably a top 2, top 3 worldwide. So there's a lot of fame that came with their participation and their relative success fighting in that war. But it's sad. I mean, there's a sadness that permeates all of it.
Right. All right. It looks like we have a question from Patrick Reed.
Hey, Patrick.
I think Patrick's hand may be stuck because I don't see the controls.
Oh, okay.
But Patrick, if you do have a question, please speak up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
You can, fine. It's not really a question. It's a congratulation really for Alex, because I believe what he's done in this show today is he's taken what we know in philately as open philately and extended that concept far further than anybody has ever done before. I think it's brilliant because it brings the whole concept of what open philately is trying to do to a much wider audience, and it makes it much more understandable to many people. So it helps the audience for this exhibition understand why we collect these little bits of paper and envelopes and the letters that go with them and the stories that live behind them. And I think he's brought them to light in a brilliant way. So well done, Alex.
Thank you.
You continue to do extremely well.
Thank you. Yeah, the real quick backstory is 8.5 years ago, I was invited to give a 5 p.m. talk, which is a traditional meeting here at the Royal where you set up in more traditional frames, your sort of mounted pages with your collection or whatever you're going to be talking about, whatever you've been invited to talk about. You should typically, they're shown for a couple hours, people look at them, and then you give a 45-minute presentation about highlights of that or the overall story, some sort of what I've done here at the beginning of this talk. And the idea basically is, when I was invited to do that, I asked the then president or the vice president who was asking me to do it 4 years in the future. They do a lot of advanced planning here. I said, well, instead of doing it just for an afternoon, I really would like to bring some Zulu shields and other artifacts to be able to give some greater context to the postal artifacts, just like what you were saying, sir. I eventually turned into, well, hey, we've got a museum here at the Royal. It's a 154-year-old organization, and has an accredited museum. Let's maybe do a public exhibition where we do just what we have accomplished here. It's funny to me, by the way, to describe it, actually standing here at the exhibition talking with this large group on Zoom, because for years I've been sort of waving my hands around and trying to describe to people what this was all about. And now that the cases are here and objects are actually in cases and there's something to physically come and see and show you, it's been a long journey and a lot of effort. So I am thrilled to be able to do this even in a virtual format. But the idea really is that too much philately, we often in postal history and philately, open class included, we still consider our artifacts, our objects, the things we collect and study to be the most important part. It's always, and yes, though we love these artifacts, and they are in the category that drew us all to this, to where we are now, that they are only one of hundreds of categories, thousands of categories of artifacts that are relevant for understanding any moment in history, any time in history, any place in history. And so, though the postal artifacts take up about half of the artifacts here, I try very hard to have anyone that's looking at them see them as part of one flowing story. And so it's been a major challenge to sort of keep it all together in a cohesive way. And anyway, anyone that sees the catalog, you'll get a sense of it, because many objects we put other supplementary images, text, information, references, so that the postal collector and student can look at these postal objects in a new way, as well as the non-postal objects in a new way, and vice versa. The military historian or general enthusiast or member of the public who never thought about postal objects in any major way before sees them in this contextual environment that really brings it all alive. So I'll also share a very quick story. I mentioned this envelope right here was the first postal object I collected. This Traveler's Handbook was the very first non-postal object that I collected besides toy soldiers. It is a field guide with Zulu and English translation or translated phrases that was actually published in February 1879, and it's made in a format to be able to fit into officers' jacket pockets. And it's actually the War Department's copy that was deaccessioned in the later 20th century. And when I found this, it was a book military ephemera dealer that offered it to me, and my initial reaction was, it's too expensive. It's too expensive. And he said, Alex, he said, if you really want to start exploring the Zulu War, the objects and the items, especially the books and the manuals, like this is a map that came out right after the war began as well, and went down there with officers with the reinvasion. These are the objects you need to be able to start to see more beyond the two-dimensional postal objects that you're already collecting. And he goes, and if this book was a cover, an envelope sent by an officer, you would have bought it with the snap of the fingers and without any hesitation. And he goes, and I dare you to find another. That was 15 years ago. I'm still looking for another. And he was right. I mean, so that was one of those moments, one of those major light bulb moments where I realized that if I wanted to really learn and understand the context of the postal objects, I needed to dive more deeply into the collecting. And really the most incredible part, which I referenced earlier, was by getting into other fields to find other non-postal objects of the Zulu War, I discovered many of my best postal objects that are now in this exhibit in my collection. So it ended up being fortuitous in so many ways that I ended up veering off of a traditional philatelic and postal market in order to go into other fields, because it changed my life. I mean, it changed the whole focus of how I collect and how I was able to do this. And anyway, there's a lot of staff here and interns and volunteers. My Ian Knight, who you met briefly, my co-curator, and others that have been instrumental in bringing this together, as well as I mentioned, Cherrystone Auctions is our presenting sponsor. They gave £25,000 to underpin the funding to make this possible. But Scott Treppel and Skylar Rumsey of Siegel Auctions and Rumsey Auctions tremendous supporters, as well as many others, that Dan Reiterband, Steve Walski, there's a whole list to list off, but I cannot thank all of them enough, because they made this possible. They saw a vision to do something that just had not really been done in this way, connecting philately and postal history with dynamic history in a much more three-dimensional format. And so you're getting a sense here again. Thank you for that a question, of which I gave you a very long-winded, winding answer.
That was excellent, Alex. Are there any other questions from the audience?
Oh, we'd love to get your feedback on this really unique. This is the first time we tried this format. And, there's a little anxiety when you do something new. So we'd love to get your feedback on how you liked it. We thought it would be an effective way to show the exhibit and be there if, you couldn't travel to London.
So
And
I'll say that for the 27th, there's a second show of this. My plan for that is, if you've already seen this, you may be thinking, well, I've kind of seen it once. My objective there is I'm gonna do an in brief again, but I'm actually gonna go a little bit faster through the story. I'm gonna focus on some different postal objects in each of the cases, if I'm able to sort of keep it all together, but that's my objective at least. So there'll be some repeats, but I will try to show some other objects. So that's at least the idea. But most importantly, if you know someone that you think would be interested in this topic, whether it be Southern Africa, military history, or simply just seeing really interesting and dynamic kind of combinations of artifacts like this, please, to the audience, please promote the July 27th talk, because I would love to bring in more people, even if they're not postal history or philately oriented, to be able to see this. And of course, if you are here in the UK or in Europe or in the United States, and you are able or interested to come here in person, you would be warmly welcomed, and would love to be here with you in person. And if you reference seeing this talk and to me here in the gallery, we'll pull an artifact or two out and actually put some real history in your hands and get you as close to as we possibly can to the attributable connection with a place and time that this dramatic history presents.
Oh, and Alex, for those people who want to order the catalog, if they don't want down the address to do that, you could send me a note, send the British Empire Study Group a note.
Say out loud, it's if you go to the Royal Philatelic Society London's website and just go to their online shop or shop, whatever that is on their menu. It's like a traditional museum exhibition for any members of the Royal that are on this. We've got logoed letter openers, tea towels. Actually, you might as well, for fun, just show everyone the gift shop. So a gift shop, and we have turned the Stockhomia room into just that. So we've got, from notebooks to tea towels to tote bags, lanyards, just like what you'd expect. And also we have a toy soldier display, of course, with everything for sale. The objective being, this was examined the exhibition, they too could buy a toy soldier and a Zulu warrior and sort of begin a passion of their own. We also have Zulu beadwork that was made for us, Zulu Natal. They support 300 Zulu women beaders so they support their livelihood as a fundraising mechanism for the organization, for the patients that they care for. Different books that are being published or celebrating their publication this year. Here at the exhibition, we have a symposium that's taking place this week where 31 speakers from Australia, South Africa, the United States, and the trying to show that there's lots of different ways to look at this history, and of course bringing lots of non-philatelists and postal historians to expose them and hopefully do some cross-pollinating of philately.
Thank you very much, Alex. I mean, this has just been really, really phenomenal. Before we call it a wrap, you guys are silent. Is it too early in the morning?
Your normal timing of the presentation, it's too late here. The exhibition is closed, and because it is a live experience, and I very much did not want everything you've seen here. Nothing is a replica. Nothing is a photocopy. These are all the real objects that have been part of this Zoom web, the British time that I'm currently in. And also a shout out to my wife, by the way, who's brought our 7, 4, and 1-year-old children here on her own for us to be here for 6 weeks together, because I was from this exhibition. So it's been a real all family, all hands on deck experience.
That's terrific. What a patient.
Other significant other of the highest order.
That's
Nice.
terrific. Great job. I mean, this is phenomenal. Terrific.
Thank you.
And it works as well. It worked really well.
Well, yeah. So anyway, so
For
if you
that
as I-
feedback.
thank you for that. And again, if you enjoy, again, I think this is the shop link. If you want to post that again to out on the chat right now, and that's the one also to use in the email. I'll follow up with you. But anyone that's interested to get the catalog, I'd love for you to receive it. When we do this again on the 27th, please again, and anyone listening, please invite others to join us. Just like the exhibition is free, so is joining these webinars, and we'd love to have you. I will attempt to show some different things, tell a few different stories. I'm going to focus a little bit more on the three-dimensional artifacts in the next talk. I skipped over some really incredible three-dimensional objects here a little bit intentionally. So we're very, very postal focused on that. Today's talk, the next one will be still mostly postal artifacts. So I'm going to focus on a few different letters, different covers, and some of the other really dramatic three-dimensional artifacts. So that's a lot going on here. But if you are available to come, if you also have relatives, friends, neighbors that live in the UK, no matter what their interests are, if they just have an open mind and want to and just enjoy learning or exploring new things, please send them our way. clashofempires.org. Again, it's a free exhibition, open until Monday, the 31st of July, and we'd love to welcome them here to the exhibition. And our whole point is, if you've always been struggling with how do you introduce philately and postal history to that friend, that neighbor, that cousin, that whoever, this is the opportunity, because we'll give them something that's dramatic and engaging and just totally different, obviously, than what most people see in any kind of exhibition like this.
Right.
Thank you so much, Alex. I'm going to put your view back on here. So for those of you who are panelists, you could control that with your view, but those of you who remain in the audience, I'm flipping back and forth for you. But okay, is there? I know you don't want to leave, right, Alex? The Royal is going to have to kick us out of the building.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's just like one of those things where, I'm flattered that so many folks have stayed on, but there's just so many other cool parts of, there's 550 objects. It's like it's 10 PowerPoint presentations over, 10 hours worth of objects to show you. So it's, there is so much to see. And every time what we talk about is anyone that comes to visit, everyone sees something different, including all the people that are on here. I imagine there's some object I passed by that's drawn your attention, that's been more engaging to you than maybe anyone else. All sorts of interesting things. A Zulu inkwell where the head scroll goes back and there's ink inside of the main body with the pen as the sort of looking like the Zulu spear with the shield. So yeah, it's all sorts of interesting
George, you have a
things.
question. I don't want to forget about you. George, did you have a question? You had your hand raised. Okay.
So one interesting thing about the first HMS Zulu, she was damaged in the war as both tribal class destroyers. And rather than scrap them both, the bow of one was stuck to the rest of the other, and she became HMS Zubian.
I did not know that.
Which confused German intelligence because they didn't know when it was built.
Yeah. Well, here's that ship. Here's the first one. Puzzles. So yeah, and otherwise, yeah, if there's always love meeting people that are interested in talking with people that are have deep interest in this history, of course. And so yeah. Well, thank you everyone. Again, I don't want to hold anyone up here, recognizing that you're in the start. Well, some of you might be in the start of your days. Others, if you're in Britain here, they're at the end of your day. But very much appreciative of all of you, of everyone taking their time to join this presentation and to experience this. Please reach out to the exhibition and connect with us further and send people our way. We love to show off what we have to display here to the largest audience possible. I didn't go into the modern philately element. I've got some interesting things related to the 20th century depictions of the Zulu War in stamp design in particular. I'll save that to the 27th. So, yeah. Oh,
Well, thank you, Alex. That was a wonderfully presented concept, I have to say.
great. Well, thank you. Thank you. More than anything, thank you to the organizers for being willing to take a bit of a risk, because it was a bit of a risk. If anyone else probably proposed this to you in some form, you'd be in someone's stamp room, sort of, bouncing around boxes like we all have, sort of, in our spaces of study and collecting. But this was such a unique opportunity to have it all displayed, in this professional environment in ready-made, specially made cases, so that I just can't imagine ever really having it like this again. And so it's the perfect opportunity to do something live, where, as so many of you have done, thank you for your questions, but being able to just say, oh, let's go look at something. Okay, let's go look. Oh, and there it is. So you can really do so much in this dynamic three-dimensional gallery that we're in, and I'm thrilled to do it.
That's phenomenal.
And the answer, by the way, Joan, to Keith was 11. He asked about Victoria Crosses,
Oh.
and the answer is 11. And there of those, it was, I think 7 of them were to the 24th. It's still the most Victoria Crosses, the equivalent of the U.S. Medal of Honor, awarded to a single unit of a regiment in a single engagement. That includes all of World War I and World War II. But there's a lot of politics about why some of those Victoria Crosses were awarded. Remember, it was the underdog victory at the end of a disastrous day for the British military. So there's lots of controversy and debate and discussion about about the papering over of that defeat earlier in the day, and sort of playing up the success of the defensive Rorkestrip. It does not make the history any less dynamic or engaging, but it's just the many ins and outs of all of this. But we've got things related to Rorkestrip. These are Rorkestrip defenders. There's one of the Victoria Cross recipients seated right there. Items related to the South Wales Borderers, who are the sort of the unit, the regiment that comes together from the amalgamation of the 24th. There's another veteran right there. So we could go all day, but we'll save it to the 27th. And thank you, Joan, for this. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Oh, well, thank you again, Alex. I think this is fantastic. I mean, Edith, did you have a question before I close?
No.
No? Well, hello, welcome. Yeah, we're pretty informal here, so
Love it.
It gives people you should be free to chat and without a lot of on that. But thank you again. Thank you very much. Any questions that we didn't get to, we'll send them to Alex, and he will, if he has time, he'll respond to them. I think eventually he'll get to them, but I think we covered most of them, right, Rob? Okay. So again, our next presentation would be on Thursday. We have 3 shows, and then we do the Zulu live from London back on the 27th. And as Alex told you, it's independent, so you didn't have to see part 1 to see part 2.
Mhm.
And okay, anything else before I get back to work? They don't fire me.
Cheers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you,
So
Alex.
for those of you who have never attended, I never shut you off until I don't see anybody, because. And Alex, you'll go and feed your wife and children.
Absolutely. We'll take care of everyone. We're on our way.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye, everyone.
Okay, goodbye. Thank you. All right. Well, Richard Debney came to the wild side. He won't unmute though.
Yeah, I never heard from him.
Yeah. So anyway, hey, thank you very much, Rob. I think it, I saw everything, so I think it went pretty well.
Oh, yeah. I
Everything-
like that concept a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, we tested it, and Alex is great. We tested it, and it looked good, but you never know how people are going to react to
Right.
something new. So,
No, I thought it went really well.
well, I look forward to the 27th. That should be great.
You
So-
betcha.
All right, let me let's log off. Hi, Richard. Did you unmute? No, you did not. So we'll log off and I'll get back to work.
We'll see you soon, John.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.